President Backlini, thank you for organizing this extraordinarily important event and for everything IDC is doing to stand in solidarity with our Christian brothers and sisters in the Middle East. I was hoping that we would be joined by Congressman Frank Wolf, Chairman Wolf, but he is under an ethics rule that precludes him from being with members of Congress on an event like this. But I think it's important to remember Frank Wolf is a modern-day William Wilberforce. For 34 years in Congress, Frank Wolf spoke boldly, persuasively, and eloquently on behalf of persecuted believers around the world. The landmark International Religious Freedom Act of 1998 remains one of Frank's many historic legislative achievements. That law and his continued advocacy shines a bright light of religious intolerance anywhere and anytime religious bigotry manifests its ugly tentacles. We are likely to move in January on a reauthorization and expansion of the IRFA, International Religious Freedom Act. I've introduced it, and we named it after this champion, Frank Wolf, and it is so fitting because he, again, has been speaking out on behalf of the Christians as well in the Middle East, and certainly in Iraq and Syria. We are here today because ISIS continues to commit genocide against Christians, and because the White House is considering a public genocide declaration that would exclude, I say again, would exclude Christians. Last week, I convened a subcommittee hearing to explore ISIS violence against Christians, Yazidis, and other religious and ethnic minorities, and the humanitarian needs of these communities. It was indeed powerful to hear Mirza Ismail, founder and chairman of the Yazidi Human Rights Organization International, testify, and I quote him in pertinent part, "I am here today," he said, "to speak of preventing the annihilation by ISIS of my people, the Yazidis, and the Chaldo-Assyrian Christians in Iraq and genocide. Both Christians and the Yazidis," he said, "face this genocide together. And what has happened to the Yazidis and the Chaldo-Assyrian Christians in Sinjar and in the Nineveh plain is nothing less than genocide," close quote. Chaldean Bishop Francis Calabat testified and said, "I wish to note that the Obama administration, including President Obama himself, have neglected to mention that the ISIS atrocities were committed against Christians, atrocities of rape, killings, crucifixions, beheadings, hangings that Syrian and Iraqi Christians have endured, and they are intentionally omitted. There are countless Christian villages," he went on to say, "in Syria who have been taken over by ISIS and have encountered genocide, and the Obama administration refuses to recognize their plight." I would note parenthetically that about 3 years ago, I chaired a hearing on the persecution of Christians in Syria, and it was made very clear that the administration was not doing its due diligence to include and to robustly respond to these horrific killings, which again now have risen to genocide. When genocide, later on you'll hear from Dr. Greg Stanton, one of the world's leading experts on genocide and foremost practitioners in combating it and holding perpetrators accountable. Dr. Stanton testified at our hearing last week and said, and I quote, "The clearly documented facts on the ground and our country's treaty obligations under the Genocide Convention require that our government include Christians as victims of genocide. When genocide has been committed or is looming, the President and Congress should publicly say so and take robust actions to end it and to ensure accountability. Too often, weak words have been used to justify weak action or outright indifference." On August 7, 2014, as ISIS was sweeping across Iraq, and President Obama authorized airstrikes to protect the Yazidis on Sinjar Mountain, Secretary Kerry stated that ISIS's, and I quote him, "campaign of terror against the innocent, including Yazidi and Christian minorities," again, he said Christian minorities, "and its grotesque and targeted acts of violence bear all the warning signs and hallmarks of genocide." President Obama added that we can act carefully and responsibly to prevent the potential act of genocide, close quote. Almost a year and a half later, this is the closest the administration has come to openly acknowledge that ISIS has actually committed genocide and that Christians are among the victims of that genocide. And I would suggest respectfully that there is absolutely nothing potential, to use the president's word, about the genocide being waged against Christians and Yazidi. It's a fact. Any failure, I would submit, by President Obama to recognize the ongoing genocide against Christians would be absolutely irresponsible, indefensible, and unconscionable.